It is Monday, January 29th, 2018 at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Admissions Live. I'm your host, Adam Castro, and on today's live broadcast, Mythbusting Enrollment Marketing, we are joined by Michael Stoner and Gil Rogers. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network. Our episodes offer you direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Be a part of our live broadcast by sharing your knowledge. Participate in today's discussion by tweeting us using hashtag HigherEdLive. All of our episodes are free and easy to access in the video archives at higheredlive.com, or take Higher Ed Live with you on the go by subscribing to the podcast. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a digital-first agency committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. We know you've wondered what prospective teens are thinking when they receive and read or ignore your institution's recruitment, marketing, and we are excited to kick off that conversation today. In partnership with NRCCUA, the Mythbusting Enrollment Marketing Research will uncover the best marketing channels and communication preferences that have the biggest influence on prospective teens' perception of your institution. Don't miss your chance to sign up now and receive early access to the research results and the white paper releasing soon. Admissions Live is sponsored by NRCCUA, a membership organization supported for student success for over 44 years. NRCCUA members gain access to the Encora Data Lab platform, gaining access to a wealth of data and analytics that drive better enrollment decisions. Additionally, Encora Data Lab supports digital marketing strategies, helping you combine the data in your inquiry pool with high-impact social media engagement strategies tailored to your institution. Learn more and get started at encora.org. Okay, well, I'm really excited about today's episode. I have two tremendous guests that really need no introduction, but the first thing I want to do is give them the floor and just to tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do. Michael, why don't we start off with you?
All right. Thanks, Adam. I'm president of M. Stoner, and I've been around for a little while in higher ed. And this particular topic is one that I'm really, that I find just completely fascinating. And it's been great to work with Gil on the research that we've done for the past 3 years. We've had a good time. And I think, well, speaking for myself, I've certainly learned a lot.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us today. Gil?
Great to be here. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. And yes, thank you, Michael. This has been a great opportunity to really shed some light on some myths and realities over the past few years. My name is Gil Rogers. I'm the Director of Marketing at NRCCUA. Been in admissions and enrollment management for longer than I would like to say, but not as long as some other folks. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation and excited to dive into some of these with Adam on the hot seat for a little bit.
Yeah, you can tell I'm fidgeting already. I'm getting a little nervous about what's to come. But before we get to that, why don't we talk a little bit about the Mythbusting Survey. This is something that you guys have been doing for quite a while, and you're breaking kind of new ground with this study. So why don't you give the listeners a little bit of a background on it?
Well, about 4 years ago, Gil and I started talking about how we could do some research that was really focused on some of the things that come up during conversations and in blog posts and in tweets and stuff, where people read something and all of a sudden they're totally convinced that every teen everywhere is doing something because they just read a piece of national data from a survey that says that they're doing it. And so we started asking ourselves what would happen if we asked teens a set of questions and then asked professionals in admissions and marketing and web development in higher ed the same set of questions, just to see what we understood about what teens did and where there were gaps in our knowledge, and give us a chance to sort of think about and recalibrate some of our understanding of this really important market. And of course, even though the admissions market is changing and students look a whole lot different than they did maybe 20 years ago, teens are still a very, very important market for many of the institutions that we work with, and many of the people I know are really interested in doing a better job at reaching teens and understanding more about how they pursue an education and what they do, what they're looking for when they visit a website. And so that was our original thinking about the process.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, you know, when we did the first study 3 years ago now, the title was Mythbusting Admissions, and the idea was looking specifically at admissions recruitment tactics, so mailers, emails, phone calls from admissions counselors, those sorts of things. Last year, we went kind of up a level and went specifically into one channel, so myth-busting websites, knowing that it was the top resource that's used persistently throughout the process through a number of other research studies. We wanted to see what was most important, what content was most important, what kind of messaging, navigation, those sorts of things. And then from that, we learned that there's an appetite to look at the broader marketing mix. So not just the messages a student gets from the admissions office, but what about the messaging that most often the marketing department is responsible for supporting and putting together? So not only just the website as a whole, which we know serves multiple masters with the development office and community relations and the president's office, et cetera, but also things like billboards, online advertising, display, retargeting, those sorts of things. So myth-busting marketing, enrollment marketing is kind of a mix of overarching marketing efforts that an institution is using, but with those admissions channels infused, because with the goal being teens, we wanted to include things like text messaging and other legacy channels as well. So it's fun to kind of look at the misalignment and alignment between some of these, between the responses in some of these.
Yeah, and I think this is well timed, and particularly for me, because one of my big pushes right now is to really, find out how the students are going to react, or what the students want from a communication plan. I think, speaking for someone that's on a campus, you get busy, you get bogged down, you do a lot of copying, pasting from year to year in terms of strategy, just because of time constraints and personnel constraints. And you can go a cycle, 2 cycles, 3 cycles without doing another round of outreach to your prospective students or your current students to find out what they want. So I think this type of information is incredibly important, because it gives you a bit of a case study, even though it's more national than local, but a bit of a case study to give you some insights on what your students are probably thinking. And then it can really start a conversation on your individual campus about how you should be tailoring your messaging. And it takes a lot of time, and it's a lot of effort, for someone in my position as a vice president to work with a marketing office, to work with an admissions office, to try to calibrate all those strategies. But it's incredibly important to do so, I think.
Well, I think that's right. And one of the things that I think we were trying to do with the whole series of studies that we've done is to encourage someone in your position to really think carefully about some of the assumptions that you make, or some of the assumptions that some of your colleagues make. Like we've got to put 20,000 videos on our website because teens are all about videos. Well, maybe not. That's one of the things that we heard last year, that yeah, videos are helpful and teens like them, but it's not the first thing that they look for. So, one of the things that's suggested to me is that there's still a real appetite for very high quality text on a website that is supported by videos. So not to say that videos aren't bad, but have a choice. Up the text site and shoot a bunch of videos. Maybe you should do the text first because it's really, really important, and then follow it up with videos. So those are the kind of discussions that we were hoping that some of our research would inform as they occur on campuses with people like you and your colleagues.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right into the research itself now. This is why I'm on the hot seat. Michael and Gil gave me a list of 8 myths/realities to go over with our viewers today. And after I present them, I'm going to kind of give my thoughts on where I think students lie in a particular myth and reality. And Gil has already set the bar quite low for me in terms of getting it correct. So we're looking for about a 5.5, over under a 5.5 correct out of the 8. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. The first myth of reality: most teens review dozens of websites during their college search and choice. And when I saw this, my first reaction was, I don't think that's the case. I think there are a certain number of websites, and I think kind of like the college search process where a student may apply to several institutions but only visit a couple. I think the same could probably be said for websites where they're doing a lot of their searching on third-party sites, whether it just be a normal Google search or a partner like niche.com or something like that, where they're doing some search and they're trying to get some testimonials from students. But when it comes to the meat and potatoes of coming to a college website, I think that is reserved for kind of the shorter list of institutions that they're considering. Gentlemen, how'd I do?
So what you're really suggesting, Adam, is they've already done their sort, and they have a short list of institutions that they're looking at, and those are the ones that they're looking at, not dozens of institutions. Is that a fair assessment of what you said?
That's what I'm going with.
All right. Well, you'll be interested to know that 66% of professionals believe teens review 11 or more higher ed websites, 11 or more. So not dozens, but quite a few in their college search and choice process.
And that puts you in the 34% that are actually closer to the student voice. So you're at, I think you hit the nail on the head, Adam, that it's 23% of students in our survey said that they explored 11 to 20 colleges, which is the highest end of the range that we gave them. And 55% said 10 or fewer. So I think you're absolutely right. I think there's this propensity and opportunity to, there's this propensity to do what we do as consumers, right? To do some third-party evaluating and searching. You mentioned sites like Niche and there's others, right, that students use to find and evaluate, compare schools side by side, and then from that kind of discovery process, filter out the schools that aren't necessarily a good fit. Then take that step to go to your .edu website to gather the official information that they're looking for. And then we have that whole study on myth-busting websites that tells you what you need to have there when you get there. But that's a great assessment. You're 1 for 1 so far, Adam.
Well, I think it's important that everybody knows this, because I think this helps us tailor the website. And you said there's a myth-busting research on the website itself that I encourage everybody to check out. But I think a lot of colleges, and mine is certainly included in this, try to be all things to all people on the website. So you're trying to speak to someone just browsing, you're trying to speak to alumni, to donors, when you really need to be focusing in on the prospective student that has you as one of the 3 schools that they're interested in. And I think that messaging is a lot different than when you're trying to speak to a search list of College Board names of 40,000 and directing them to your website. So, and I know, Michael, M Stoner does a lot of work with institutions in terms of helping schools optimize their websites. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's right, Adam. We've done. We've worked on probably more than 300 web projects in higher ed. And actually next Wednesday, Voltaire, my partner, Voltaire Moran, is hosting a free ed website on, or a free webinar on higher ed website redesigns done right. He'll cover 6 things you need to know to set up your redesign project for success, and go over a list of 10 mistakes institutions usually make and how to avoid them. So maybe if you wouldn't mind just tweeting out a link to the sign up and the information for that webinar, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. We'll get that out in just a moment here. I encourage everybody to sign up for that. I certainly will. All right, so let's move on to myth reality number 2. Print is dead to teens. This is one that is near and dear to my heart because I have run the professional roller coaster as it relates to print. I was Mr. Print back in 2003 when I started in admissions. And then I drank the Kool-Aid, around 2010, 2011, 2012, when everybody was saying print was dead and you had to do everything digital and move everything online. But then we saw the results of that, and we saw the pushback that we were getting from students and parents on the lack of print in our admission strategy. So over the last couple of years, we've kind of gone back to, you know, kind of our old methods in a lot of cases, in terms of, you know, making sure that we're not doing acceptances just in a portal, but they're getting a physical accept pack in the mail. We've even reinstated, don't you know, shoot the messenger here, you know, some prospect and inquiry mailings for select audiences that we think are higher yield. But overwhelmingly, we have heard from students and parents, even though you have every hashtag that says, you know, the college mail hashtag with everything's in the garbage and or lighting it on fire, that they do want that as part of their recruitment process. So I'm saying it, print is not dead for teens.
Oh, cool. Well, 20% of professionals of our colleagues responded that they said that they thought that print influenced teens' opinion of college. So I'd say that the sentiment among our colleagues is that they believe teens don't pay much attention to print. And when Gil and I did the research on myth-busting admissions, that was our first series, our first research project like this, we included images of Instagram, from Instagram, of kids, you know, just with these big armfuls of view books and stuff, and you know, as a way of communicating about how they felt about a lot of the stuff that they got. Gil, what did teens say about this time, though, when we asked them about their how print influenced their opinions of the college?
Yeah, and before I get into the teen data point, I have a quick aside. I think it's very interesting that, you know, Adam hit the nail on the head that it's, you know, well, print is definitely a part of the mix, right? And to completely remove it from all of your communications would definitely spell some doom and gloom for a lot of your efforts. It sounds like, Adam, you've experienced a little bit of that. I think but the fact that 20% of our respondents on the professional side said that they felt teens were influenced, their opinions were influenced by print. Yet I would presume that close to 100% of those respondents are actively using print as a big part of their recruitment portfolio is very interesting. So maybe the pendulum on perception is swung a little bit too far into that direction, because what we found is that out of the influencers of teen opinion, about 30% of teens said that print did impact their perception of a college. And that's positively or negatively. And I think what that says is that print is still definitely a part of the mix, but it's part of a exactly that, a mix, right? There's a place for print in your overall outreach. I think, Adam, you pointed out acceptance packets, right? There's still that value in that tangible piece of mail that says, congratulations, you're in, right? You can run up and down the hallway with an acceptance packet. You can take pictures and post on social media with an acceptance packet. You can't really do that when you see the notification on your phone or you see it on a computer in your portal. Those are fine too, but the accept packet is still that tangible piece of real information. And what's interesting, and we'll talk about this in a little bit too with respect to things like social media. You know, 30% of students said that print impacted their opinions. Only 22% said social media did from official college channels. So there's this kind of, you know, behavior to put a lot of effort and investment in social, which we still should, but you know, we need to temper our expectations with how much impact these different channels have, because you know, print. Adam, you're 2 for 2 now, because you know, print is definitely not dead. It's just part of a broader overarching strategy, and not the only arrow in your quiver with respect to reaching and engaging students. So focusing your print messaging on students who are well matched based on your predictive analytics, based on all of your historical enrollment data, looking at where students are coming from, leveraging the tools at hand, whether it's in Core Data Lab or your institutional research department or your own ability to use pivot tables in Excel, whatever it is that you're using to evaluate your outcomes. Print is still a big component of that for sure.
And I think this is one of those things that you can certainly customize this for your campus and the student body that you serve. I mean, one of the really interesting things that we have seen over the years is that, you know, when you talk about posting your accept packet on your accept letter on social media, if we broke down kind of the information, and first generation college students post that information at a higher rate than non-first gen students. But that makes some sense. It's more of a celebration. This is more of a, you know, something that hasn't happened in their family's, you know, lifetime. So it's a bigger deal. So that makes sense. And again, Gil, I completely agree. You can't do that with a portal announcement.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
So.
It's great that you bring up the first gen piece too, because we did dive a little bit deeper on print to see, and in a few other areas, and we might do a separate write up with some key findings. But first gen students were over a third said that their opinions were influenced by print materials they received from the school. So there's that thirst for that tangible piece, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, like you said, it's their first time through this process. Their parents don't necessarily have the frame of reference that legacy students might have, so that they're using this information as a Bible, which I would say, and I'm going to be on my soapbox here for a second on well matching, is why it's more important for college admissions and enrollment people to be smarter about their use of print materials in their recruitment mix. Because what we're doing when we send out these giant list mailers to students who are not well matched, who are not a good fit for our institution, for these students specifically, first gen students, we are confusing the process and making it more challenging for them, right? So the better we can be about matching our message with the right students, the less we're going to confuse the process for those kids. Because the reality is those legacy students, the high achievers, they're filtering their list before they even get those search mailers. So you may as well do a better job of making your data smarter overall.
Yeah, that's right. And one thing I just wanted to throw in here, you know, in terms of how different channels influence teen opinion. The website is the most important. 62% of teens said that was the main influence in their opinion of an institution.
And then when you talk to vice presidents of enrollment management, they'll say the website is the biggest challenge in terms of making that the primary recruitment tool for students. And I think we acknowledge that how important it is, but getting to where we want to be proves very difficult in many times.
Well, that's right. And, you know, when you think about the fact that institutions have only been really thinking about how to manage their websites effectively since about 2000, and have been publishing stuff since what, you know, 1970 or so or before.
Since paper started.
Yeah, we've got some time to you know, really get up to speed on what the web requires. And of course, the challenge is it's been changing all the time.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, we're calling it that I'm 2 for 2. So we can move on to myth reality number 3. Teens prefer online interactions to face-to-face. And I thought this was really interesting. And my guess is that professionals are definitely split on this issue. I think that we as the industry feel that students have become such digital natives that they prefer all their interactions online, both for the convenience, but also the impersonal aspect of it. There's less pressure. You're not in front of a admission counselor. You're not in front of an administrator. But I don't necessarily think that's how students feel. I think that they don't want to talk to me. I don't think they want to talk to a higher end administrator in enrollment management. They may not necessarily want to talk to a director of admission. I think they want to talk to, you know, someone that they feel is accessible, and someone that they feel can be more of a friend through the process. You know, an admission counselor, for instance. And you know, we've done some A/B testing with communications coming from my office, coming from both myself or the director, and then coming from an individual as a admission counselor. And you can see the interaction increase from students that are getting emails, text messages, and the like from an admission counselor rather than what's perceived as a higher level administrator. So I think they'll be split, but I think students will say that there's still a place for face-to-face interactions through the recruitment and admission cycles.
Well, that's an interesting response, and I think you've hit on two things there. One is that students there's often a misunderstanding because people in higher ed are kind of thinking about a more hierarchical approach to communication, that teens might be interested in hearing more from a more senior person, which certainly from a development standpoint might be true, or from a fundraising standpoint to a fundraising prospect, but not necessarily a teen. And the second is that there's a component that you're suggesting there that's not only a face-to-face personal interaction, but a personal interaction that's mediated by some kind of technology. So not surprisingly, and in general, professionals underestimate the interest teens have in communicating by email and overestimate their interest in social media. So in general, professionals don't believe that teens really value very much impersonal conversations, particularly during the phase when teens are researching colleges. On the other hand, when teens are accepting or deciding, professionals believe that they really do value those kinds of communications. And professionals believe that teens really value email very highly. So let's talk about, though, what teens say.
Yeah, and first of all, I just want to say that if anybody ever doesn't want to talk to Adam, I would highly recommend it. So any student who doesn't want to talk to Adam, they really should. So it's interesting because, Michael mentioned things like email and direct mail. There's definitely, again, value for those types of communications that are not face-to-face, but they are direct to the student, giving them the information. But when we look at the data, Michael hit the nail on the head with things like social media. The professionals perceive, over half of the professionals perceived or believe that teens would say that they prefer that channel during the search and the acceptance process. But the reality is that number tumbles on the student side to about 20% while they're researching and about 13% when they're accepting or deciding. So I think, I look at that the lens of a student of, they're thinking about the official social media channels from the school, which they're going to use those as like an FAQ or a troubleshooting type channel. They're not gonna, or they're gonna read maybe, and we'll get into this in a little bit, maybe with advertising and that sort of stuff. But when they're using a channel like social media, they're using that to find and engage with other admitted students, current students, getting their perspective on life on campus. They're not necessarily liking your brand page, right? Which is okay, because you have other ways to reach them with your brand page, with messaging you want to get out to them. But it's not going to be their primary channel for engaging with you, specifically when they're not currently enrolled with your school. When we asked students about the channels that did influence their opinions on colleges, the top channels, aside from the website, again, which we know is kind of an omnipresent, always there channel of official information for them. The top responses were campus visitor tour, a school visit, so a counselor coming to visit them at their school, and a phone calls from admissions officers. So there's definitely still value in those. There's still that thirst for a personal connection. And I've said this almost every time we've talked about this topic, that the admissions business is still a people business, right? There's still value in connecting with that person. But Adam, like you said, it's probably mostly to that advocate, that person that they want to be connected with in the office, that person that can go to bat for them in financial aid, scholarship award conversations, those sorts of things. It's the admissions counselor, right? It's that person that can be that champion for them. So anybody that says that things like high school visits are a complete waste of time is actually kind of wrong. Where high school visits fall off the rails is when there's not good content at those types of opportunities. We could have a whole separate conversation about good and bad travel for admissions counselors, but there's definitely that thirst for face-to-face interaction. So again, multi-channel, multi-touch. Offline's not dead, it's not a bad place to be connecting with students, but you should have a combination of the two. So I'm going to give you a 3 for 3, Adam.
Nice, I'll take it. But I think one of the things that I've certainly noticed over the last couple years is there is a little bit of a lack of engagement even in the in-person meetings with students. So maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, we have a group tour, a campus tour, an open house. I just felt, and maybe this is just a bias of hearing so much about this lack of engagement from this generation of students, but I felt that there was more questions, more engagement, a little bit more activity on the students' part. Now I think there's a lot more kind of sitting back and just taking all the information in, and not necessarily engaging maybe as much as students used to. Well, and I still think it's important that they're getting that information and getting that information in person when they have the ability to speak to people if they want to. I just think that desire to gather information, particularly at the introductory phases of recruitment, whether maybe it's a large scale open house or a campus tour for a school that you haven't applied to. I just think that engagement level is probably a little bit lower than in years past. And I think that trend will continue because they can get so much information on their own just by looking up, FAQs on their phone or asking a student on Twitter that goes to the school, how do you find this building?
Yeah, but what when
right.
they're on a campus tour of a school they haven't heard of or is not super high on their list, potentially what they're doing on that tour is snapping their visit, right, and sharing it with their friends. So if they're having a good time in those types of experiences and they're getting a lot out of it, what they're likely doing is broadcasting it to their network in some ways. And if they're not, then they're using the device to channel out and ignore you, right? So it's about having a good experience for students. And to take it back to the high school visit for a second, when I was a roadrunner for the University of Hartford, my first day in admissions, I visited 4 schools, met with 2 students, right? And it was, and the style at the time was the very sales pitchy way of doing a high school visit. Hey, I want to tell you a little about the school. I want to tell you about our colleges and programs. And then, let's have some questions and answers. And it always led down to what's your average GPA, what's your average SAT score, all that sort of stuff. I think what would provide more value in those types of situations, and I'm seeing more and more of it, which is great, is more being a resource for students, coming in and talking to them about the admissions process, essay writing workshops, financial aid FAQs, being more of an advisor and a consultant, because then you're the really good advisor and consultant that helped me learn about the process, and now I'm going to consider Bloomfield College more, right? So those sorts of changing how we structure those experiences to add more value to the conversation, whether it's a college visit, a college fair, or a open house, right? Being more supportive of students and making sure we're having a positive experience. But they're looking for it. They're looking for face-to-face in addition to online engagement.
And Instagrammable, places to take pictures on campus.
There you go.
Well, I think that's right. I think one of the things to remember is that this is still a very, very personal kind of exploration for every student. And while it's true that you can sort of create these experiences that work for lots of different kinds of teens, it's still pretty personal to each one of them, and they're having that personal reaction that they're sharing with their friends, and sometimes you can find out about it and sometimes you can't, depending on what channels they're using and how they're going about their sharing.
Absolutely. So let's move on to we have number 4. Online ads are effective at reaching teens. And I am certainly on the pro side of using online advertising to reach your core audiences. I think the reason for that is simple. I think students are connected 24 hours a day. All of the things that they're using, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Twitter, whether it's any social media network, any browsing session that they're in, all of that is going to be available to institutions to use to market directly to the student. Now, I do feel that students have become a bit immune to this, and I think that they just see it as kind of some advertisements, particularly for schools that they're not interested in, as kind of white noise that's there. but they're never really going to consume that information if you're marketing in the wrong places to the wrong student. So I think from an administrative standpoint in higher ed, we have to be really strategic on how we're spending that money and where we're spending that money as appropriate to the institution that we work for. But I think from a student perspective, that online ads are probably one of the preferred means of students to be marketed to.
Well, that's an interesting response. And let me tell you what other professionals said. 45% said that online ads were effective at creating brand awareness. 36% said that they were effective at generating information requests. 29% said they were effective at generating campus visits. And 25% said they were effective at generating application submissions. Now, if you think about those brand awareness info requests, campus visits, and application submissions, there's a considerable difference, isn't there? Because you can actually measure info requests, campus visits, and application submissions. You can't really measure brand awareness. When I saw that, I thought, well, what does that mean? Yeah, we like our ads. They're really cool. So they must be increasing brand awareness.
It's a catch-all.
Yeah, there you go. That's right.
Yeah. So, and on the student side, it's, I mean, I guess from our survey helps to affirm that maybe that is effective. 67% of students said that they recalled seeing ads from colleges on their mobile or on their computer or their mobile device. So there is recall of college advertising, and over a third, about 36%, said that they actually clicked on those ads. So there is, that, and so then it's about what's that call to action, but also how are we tracking these types of efforts by our institutions, right? Because at the end of the day, when Adam, when your president comes in and says, hey, you need to justify your budget investments, across the board, and we're going to cut it by 20% next year, which happens. The challenge is going to be, how do you justify the investment in digital advertising? And if you're not tracking, if you're not attributing those ad impressions to actual outcomes, enrollment, campus visitors, et cetera, it's going to be very hard. That brand awareness level is not going to be that's in the same bucket as why we do billboards and why we do bus advertising and airport advertising, which on Twitter earlier today I had a whole diatribe about it. Feel free at Gil Rogers, check it out. And speaking of that, we also asked students where else they had seen advertisements from colleges, TV, radio, et cetera. And television advertising is up there from a remembering perspective. The issue is, budget availability, and if you're not, a school with a college football team or a basketball team that's on national TV all the time, it's probably not the best use of your investments. But there's definitely awareness of digital advertising, YouTube advertising. Students remember seeing it. Things like outdoor, like I just talked about, many students do remember seeing ads from colleges on billboards or buses or et cetera. But the number of students that actually impacts their decision to take that next step and do more research for those schools is negligible. And I think that just speaks to, again, evaluating the goal before using the tool. Outdoor advertising is not a undergraduate student recruitment vehicle. We do it because the president wants to do it. We do it because the faculty like to see it. It's, those sorts of things. But if you have if your open house budget includes a line item for a billboard, use that on a digital campaign instead. I think there's definitely an opportunity to better use those types of funds from a undergraduate recruitment perspective. Broader marketing mix, sure, I can see there being a need. There can be ways to defend a billboard, but not for undergraduate recruitment. But with respect to the overall point, you're now 4 for 4, Adam. So great work.
Take it. And I did not get the answers beforehand, I promise you. But I think there's a lot of. I think one of the challenges that I deal with, and I think I'm on, I'm much more on the digital side of this than even a lot of my peers in the field. But one of the challenges that we have on campus as it relates to digital marketing and advertising is the payoff, right? So when you're looking through click-throughs, you're looking at impressions, you're looking at all these things. We're talking particularly with click-throughs, these percentages of a percentage in terms of the students that are seeing the advertising and actually clicking through and going to a campus visitation page or going to a major page, whatever you're advertising. And so it becomes very difficult because then you're trying to quantify that, and it becomes really complicated to try to find, because a lot of it is brand, though we hate to use that term, but it's they saw the ad and then maybe in 2 hours they're going to come back to your website, but it might not necessarily be through the advertising link that, you know, prompted that behavior. And that's really hard to quantify at the college level because we just don't have the resources and the people to do that kind of work in a lot of respects. So I think that's one of the challenges, because you can see a billboard, you can see a bus ad, you can see these different things, and your trustees see them and your faculty see them, and they report back and say how great they look. But, you know, even if they get digital advertising, whether they get IP targeting or what have you, it's not going to have the same impact because when we report on those numbers, they're just seeing really tiny percentages of students. And so if you don't have that monster freshman class or that monster open house that you can directly attribute to these campaigns, it becomes difficult to justify the spend.
Yeah, and that's where I think the importance with, you know, attribution, and this is going to get in the weeds on digital marketing for 1 second, but attribution tracking, you know, in conversion tracking, using, you know, pixels to be able to track, you know, students saw or clicked your ad, then 2 hours later or 2 days later went to your site and did whatever that desired outcome was, right? Like if I did an open house ad and a student clicks through the ad on their phone, chances are they're not filling out that form on their phone, because not only because maybe your forms suck on mobile, which many schools do, but it's more so because they need to talk to their parents about the schedule. They need to talk to they need to look at, you know, their clubs and activities and sports. When can they fit it in? And then their parents are going to sit with them at the laptop or the desktop computer and actually fill out that form. So using things like attribution tracking, super big brother digital marketing stuff, you can track students across those devices, right? So, but that's, again, like you said, Adam, not stuff you're necessarily going to be equipped to do yourself. So you have to make sure when you're working with a digital marketing partner to incorporate those things into your strategies.
Well, you know, the other point to keep in mind here is that you're going to have zero intelligence on how many students have seen your billboards and taken action in response to your billboards. So the difference between a fairly small sample that click through a digital ad, that's measurable. And the kind of measurement that you'll have with your billboards is that your trustees will be really proud of them, and they like the fact that they're out there on the highway and they pass them every day on their commute to work. So I'm not saying they aren't valuable. It's just that you can't measure those in any substantial way.
Michael, I've been there, and it's a great feeling to get those comments. I have to tell you.
Yeah.
But okay, so let's move on. Actually, you know, I think this is a good time to take just a moment and kind of break down for the audience who actually took the survey from, you know, both the higher ed administration and a student perspective. So, Michael, why don't we start with you?
Sure. We sent out emails to a targeted list of people who work in admission, enrollment, higher ed marketing, communications, and web management. And we had 798 responses that we included in the final survey. We had some incompletes that we didn't include. And not surprisingly, the respondents work across multiple functions. Sometimes, of course, not surprisingly, also combining a couple of these. Nearly half were in marketing. Many were in communications, 29% worked on the web, and a quarter in admissions. That was their primary focus. And as far as institutions, 43% of respondents worked at public institutions, 30% at private universities, 16 at liberal arts colleges, community colleges, and some professional schools. And more than 50% have worked in higher ed for 5 to 15 years.
That's a good mix. I mean, you pretty much have everything covered. I'm actually surprised that it's such a high marketing lean, which I think is great for the survey results. Gil, can you talk a little bit about the students?
Awesome. Yeah. So on the student side, we surveyed about 1,700 total responses. Out of that, about 53% were juniors and 30% were sophomores. We really wanted to focus on students who were in the midst of their college search process. And of that, what's very interesting is that that 66% or so of the students used a smartphone to respond to this study, versus 96% of professionals using a laptop. That 66% is pretty astonishing considering the length of the survey and the number of options that they had in various different components. So what it does is it speaks to where students are with respect to engaging with content. So mobile first strategy across the board. Most of the students were in the process of currently researching colleges, 52%, and about a third were in that deciding to apply phase, deciding where to apply phase. So they were past the general research, and it could be somewhat reflective on earlier engagements and speak to more about where they were, they're building their list piece of the process.
Yeah, I just want to underscore what Gil said there, because really there were some fairly extensive answers to some of the open-ended questions, and these teens actually entered those answers.
From my iPhone.
Yeah, my thumbs are too big.
I mean, that is definitely a generational thing, because I can't write more than 3 sentences in an email response on my phone. So you will not find me.
Too big.
Yeah. Well, I'm a hunt and peck guy. I can't do that. Anyway, so let's get back to the myths. Retargeting is creepy and turns teens off. With this one, I think I'm pretty clear, particularly from the student perspective. I think, and this is what people have told me time and time again, is retargeting is really a fundamental strategy now for colleges and universities. I mean, if you're going to start somewhere, if you're going to start somewhere online, start with retargeting off of your website. And I think, again, this has become almost a student expectation. If they visit a site, if they're poking around, particularly if they're going deeper into the site, that ultimately that school is going to interact with them via retargeting. So first, certainly I want to know if I'm right, but second, definitely give like the short and sweet answer to what retargeting is in case somebody doesn't understand.
Well, I'm kind of revealing my bias here, but retargeting is what happens when you happen to look at a pair of shoes, and every website you look at after you look at that pair of shoes shows you an ad for, guess what, that exact same pair of shoes that you looked at on the Amazon.com website or wherever you saw them. They show up everywhere. That's essentially what retargeting is. You're right, Adam. Retargeting is a part of the world that we all live in. So we experience it all the time, and teens who spend so much time online using all kinds of tools and sites that are supported by advertising, of course, see it to a really great extent. It may or may not surprise you to know that 90% of professionals think teens react somewhat positively, or very positively to targeting, and only 20% of professionals think teens have a neutral reaction. So we think as a group that teens have a positive reaction to this stuff, and that it doesn't impact their opinion of our institutions negatively in any way.
All right, I'm very interested to see what Gil's about to say right now.
So you're definitely you're definitely in the admissions officer or marketing officer bucket here on this one, Adam. So you're in that 90% feel at least neutral or positive or negative or very positive. Interestingly, on the student perspective, about 60%, 57% of students who were aware of retargeting, which was about half in and of itself. So about half of students said that they remembered being retargeted. They didn't say retargeting because students aren't going to know what retargeting is, but we asked students, if you noticed an ad from a college after you visiting their website on a social channel or a website, about half said that they noticed, about 60% of those said that it had no effect on their perception of the college. So it didn't have a bad effect, but it didn't have a positive effect either. There was a very big middle ground bucket. So this goes back to that whole awareness play from the last question. You know, it can help with brand awareness, but is it really moving the needle with respect to, you know, post engagement? You know, there was about a third of students that said that they had a somewhat positive or positive reaction. But those are students who you might be targeting through other channels as well. So I would say that retargeting is not a bad strategy, right, for post visitor engagement. But there are definitely a suite of other digital marketing strategies to consider when you have things like custom audience targeting, right? And I'll be quick on this because I know we're going to be short on time. But you know, you already have access to the data on the students you're recruiting. You know, you have your suspect pools that you buy from NRCCUA or College Board or what have you, college fairs and visit high schools. Taking those lists and doing a custom audience campaign to identify their Instagram ID, their mobile devices, you know, not just their IP addresses, because those can be changed and move and be accurate, et cetera, but their personal devices, their social media accounts, and saying dollars on that population that I've modeled, that I'm mailing already. Strategy than retarget. If you had to choose, right? If you had to choose between the multiple strategies, that may be more effective because it's more precise. The challenge with retargeting is you could be retargeting a parent, you could be retargeting a guidance counselor, you could be retargeting, you know, faculty off campus. You can block IP addresses and whatnot, but you're going to be catching a lot of other people that you don't know who they are until they convert to that next phase in the process. So there's different ways to think about a digital marketing strategy. So I would say that from a scoring perspective, you're yes on the professional side. The student side is so middle of the road that I'm inclined to give you that half point anyway.
I'll take it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will say, you know, from something that I've noticed over the last couple of years is, you know, when we started retargeting and using IP targeting a couple of years back, there was certainly a little bit of a shock value to that, you know, where students would actually say, and parents would actually say, you popped up on our website, you know, you're talking about Accepted Student Day. We thought that was very cool and or creepy. But that is essentially gone. I mean, I haven't heard that over the last couple of years. I think now it's become almost part of, you know, what they expect.
Yep, you're right. And I think that, you know, based on the question being, is creepy and turns teens off, you're right. It doesn't turn teens off. It's not moving the needle as that silver bullet that's going to change the way that you recruit students would be the best way to think about it.
So this one I'm agonizing over. A bad visit to campus means you're off their list. And my guess is administrators are going to say yes, that they're putting all their eggs in the campus visit bucket. If it goes sideways for whatever reason, that you're no longer going to be considered by a prospective student. I agonize over campus tours. I agonize over open house events and the like for just that reason. I don't think that's the case from the student perspective. I think they can absorb a bad on-campus experience, and you're not totally out of the game if you're able to make up that ground, whether that's through a second experience or through some additional outreach at the right time. And some of that may be luck, but some of that can also be strategy, you know, using things like evaluations from open houses or campus tours or feedback from tour guides, which is something that we've used quite a bit over the last couple of years to see who we need to kind of go back out to just based on the vibe of an individual campus tour. So that's where I'm leaning. What do you guys think?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I certainly know that the admissions people, the marketers, the folks I talk to in campuses are really aware of how important a campus tour is, a campus visit is for a teen, and how it can make or break their decision about the institution, about whether to accept an offer of admission or to go someplace else. And in fact, let me just remind you that when we asked about how channels influence teens' opinion of a college or university, 78% said the campus tour was the most important. So we look at data like that and we say, wow, you know, this is really a big deal. And not surprisingly, 24% of professionals think that a campus visit can negatively, in fact, impact a teen's perceptions of a college he or she's interested in. So,
yeah, so
you're absolutely right on that part of it, Adam.
Yeah, they're in your camp, Adam, and they're in my camp too, right? I think that, when I was a tour guide, I always remembered that tours on days that it rained, my evaluations were always not as good as the tours when it was sunny and beautiful and nice out, right? And that's out of your control, but those are the things you agonize over. If it's going to rain on open house, oh my gosh, this is going to be a terrible day. 65% of teens said that a bad visit negatively impacts their view of a college that they are really interested in. So if they're really interested in your school, to your point, Adam, there is still hope in getting them back after one bad visit. I would say the extent of the bad visit is probably part of it, right? Rain to a kid who's really interested is not going to be a detractor versus, a faculty member swearing at them during an open house, right? That would be probably a turnoff, right? But I would say I want my admissions staff to have that perspective of, 94% saying that a bad experience will turn a student away, because you want that experience to be a positive one. So I would say you hit the nail on the head for both of them. I'll give you, what are we at? 5 out of 5, 6, whatever you're at. You're batting 1,000.
That's 6 for 6. I can just stop now, and I think
there you go.
I think I passed.
6 for 6 would get into the Hall of Fame. Just
right,
remember
exactly. But this one's obviously a big one, and I know Gil, this is certainly near and dear to your heart. And it is rankings matter to teens. Oh, just saying that, puts a chill up my spine.
I'm tweeting that right now. Rankings matter to teens.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Well, that's the myth and or reality. And so my thought is, this is where you come from, what institution you're working for, what type of students you're recruiting. I think has a huge advantage. I think in a broad sense, I think colleges and administrators are way more concerned about rankings than students. We're agonizing, our boards are agonizing about where we're placing. And again, it depends on your institution. I work at an access institution where rankings do not play nearly as big as a role as some other institutions in my state. But even so, I still feel, these pressures, every year when the ranking circuit comes out. But I think it's much less important for students. I think, again, you're taking the top 5% of students in the country that are looking exclusively at, Ivy League institutions. I think that's one thing. But I think for the vast majority of students, they're way more interested in fit, way more interested in the experience that they have on campus, and certainly way more interested in knowing, other people that have attended the institution and hearing from them or their school counselor about the institution and how they feel about it, rather than reading about it in a magazine. What do you think?
Well, that's interesting. That's quite an interesting response, and we'll hear what students said in just a minute, of course. And one of the things that we did here, we cheated a little bit in our answer. We asked, the question was really about, the myth was really about rankings, and do rankings matter to teens? But really the proxy for rankings on most campuses is US News and World Report. And we're not trying to pick on US News and World Report, but the fact is that inside, in-house and out-of-house, that's the best known ranking that people use. And 80% of campus professionals believe teens use and value US News rankings.
Yeah, and Adam's right again, because 80% of professionals believe that students use them. But when we asked teens, 70% of our responses said they either didn't use rankings, one from the exhaustive list of what we would consider mainstream rankings that we gave them. So we gave them US News, we gave them Niche, we gave them Forbes, we gave them, all the top, and a few lesser known ones, right? And they did not choose any of them when given that list. So 70% of students not using rankings when researching schools. So I think you're absolutely right, Adam, that there's this overemphasis on campus, and it's because it just like billboards, right? The president cares, the board cares, the faculty care, but the students not as much.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. One of my friends in the field equated it to Consumer Reports a while back. As an adult, one of the things that you hear about a lot is, rankings and things using consumer reports, but yet, less than 1% of the population that buys stuff uses consumer reports to buy things. We're using Amazon, we're using other people's input rather than a magazine that's telling us which dishwasher is the best. We're going on Amazon and then we're reading the 400 reviews from real people saying, what they liked or disliked about a product. So it's just a different way of thinking. I just don't think people think that way. And I think for students, again, the vast majority of students are just looking for their next home. They want to feel comfortable, and they're not going to get that from a ranking system.
Yeah, that's right. And again, that reinforces the value of personal connections that they're making, and the fact that they're doing a gut check when they come on campus. So that's where the information will be gathered that really helps them finalize and confirm the decision that they're making.
Well, I'm glad how that one turned out. I was hoping that's the direction we were going to go.
You're doing really well here, Adam, and we saved the perhaps most difficult one for last. So let's see how you do in this.
All right. Well, the most difficult one may be students do not want colleges to text them. And I am biased on this because I am definitely an early adopter of using text as one of our primary platforms to reach out to students. So I think this is certainly from a student perspective, I believe it's false. But I think there is a caveat here. I think that there has to be an opt-in to the text messaging platform before you reach out to students via text. I think if you do that, it's all good. And we've seen a very high interaction rate with text messaging. Students, in fact, I think the last count, about 2/3 of our phone calls go unanswered. But we're getting a much higher response rate and engagement rate via text for students that opted into our text messaging platform. So I think that the field in general is probably still late to this game. And from the higher ed administrative side, I can see a lot of people saying that might be too intrusive and saying it maybe not be an effective mode of communication. But I think from the student perspective, I think it's welcomed at this point.
Well, interestingly, 66% of professionals said that having a college text a teen would positively impact his or her view of a college. So we didn't ask about opt-in or opt-out, and that might have changed that somewhat. But basically, 2/3 of our colleagues think that texting creates a positive impression. But interestingly enough, 43% said that their college does not text prospective students.
I think that's a huge missed opportunity. And hopefully Gil backs me up right now.
and the data would say you're right. I think it's interesting. We have this on the print side. We have this whole feeling of 20% only say that students are impacted positively by print, yet everybody still does it, right? But then on the texting side, 2/3 say that teens would be positively impacted and less than half do it. 82% of teens recall or have never received a text message from a college, while over half, 56%, said that it would impact their perspective positively. So there definitely is a missed opportunity. I think the biggest takeaway here, though, is that it needs to be done right. I think if we treat text messaging like an old school search campaign where you buy a bunch of names and then send them a bunch of stuff, it's not going to be as effective. Opt-ins matter for sure, and content matters. Students don't want a fluffy, hey, click here to learn more about Bloomfield College, right? What they want are reminders about deadlines, upcoming events they've registered for. I remember when I was at the University of New Haven, was the first year we did text messaging, and it was through our CRM. And what we did was we just said, any student who's signed up for open house this weekend, we're going to send them a quick text on Thursday that's a reminder and where to park. Open house starts at 6 o'clock. Hey, looking forward to seeing you. Open house starts at 6 o'clock. Parking is in lot D. See you there. Right? Students want that type of content. Close to 80% said deadline reminders. 71% said upcoming events. 2/3 said event registration reminders and confirmation. So it's timely action, because they don't want to screw up, right? They don't want to screw up the process. So getting important information that they've opted into and reminders of what they need is viable and helpful, right? So but if you treat it like an old school search campaign, you're going to poison the well for everybody, and students are going to stop giving their phone numbers to every school. So do it right or don't do it at all is the best piece of advice that I can give. So I think we're good to say that Adam batted 1,000 for this entire thing. He's going into the Higher Ed Live Hall of Fame. So congratulations.
Yeah, yay.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. No, this was incredibly insightful, and I think certainly the listeners are going to get a lot out of it. I think one thing I just want to say on the text messaging is we saw a huge difference in accepting text as a mode of communication when it became a two-way conversation. You know, when we were blasting out of our CRM, we didn't have the ability to take incoming text via the CRM. And then we moved to a more robust platform, and now we can have a conversation. Almost all of our texts now are either questions or certainly open-ended that would allow students to engage in a conversation. And then we rank that. We bring that information in, and we're finding if students are really engaged on text, that they have a higher propensity to visit campus, and they obviously are enrolling at a higher rate. And it's really interesting data. And so I can't wait to have several more years of that data to see what actual influence that engagement has on a student's ability to enroll.
Yeah, that seems to be the case at other institutions too, and it's an indication of engagement. You're not going to see it on social channels probably, but you are going to see it in text. And the great value is that we talked about that personal connection that students really want. Well, they can establish a personal connection with a counselor or prospective student or a student that they've had an interaction with, a tour guide or a student who's interviewed them in the admission office, and that's an indication of their interest. So that's right.
Great. Well, we did tweet out a link to sign up to receive the research and white paper from Stoner and NRCCUA a few minutes ago. So I encourage everybody to jump on the Higher Ed Live Twitter handle, click that link and fill out that information so you can be the first to get this information when it is sent out. And when do we think that is going to be made public?
I would guess probably in the next 2 weeks. As soon as we can. We're looking at, I'm actually proofing the first draft right here.
Spoiler alert with the cover.
It's actually, this draft is pre-Gil, so I want to look at this first before Gil. And Mike Hannes, who's our research partner in this, has just done a terrific job. And I'm going to go over for stuff first before they get a chance to have a go at it.
Awesome.
Spoiler alert: the cover is beautiful.
Yeah,
you know that.
Great. No, but people will get a lot out of it. So I can't encourage you more to go online and sign up for that. Gentlemen, we are now in Admissions Live overtime. It doesn't happen often, but I really appreciate it. Michael and Gil, this was fantastic, and thank you for joining me on Admissions Live today.
Great. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it.
Great to be here. Take care.
So, and thank you as always, M. Stoner. You make us go. A big thank you goes out to our program sponsor, NRCCUA. We'll see you next time on Admissions Live.
Great. Thanks. Bye-bye.